But after Janet, Brad, and Dr. Scott all arrive back in the laboratory, Frank flips another magical science switch that locks them in place.
It's as if we're glued to the spot. You are so quick with fear, you tiny fools.
This is so perfectly campy and cheesy. How could you not love it?
Frank goes on to extol the virtues of being mind-fucked. But Dr. Scott isn't having it. He insists that Earthlings are going to resist their manipulation. The doctor explains to Brad and Janet that this device Frank is using could transport them through space and
perhaps even time itself.
Janet wonders if this means they're going to be sent to another planet. But as the song's title implies, there's even bigger plans than that. Despite Brad, Scott, and Janet's protests, one by one, Frank instructs Magenta to use the Medusifier to turn them to stone. Columbia has had enough. She rains down a torrent of condemnation on Frank, saying that he just chews people up and then spits them out, that he's a user. She says that he was fond of her, but then he sidelined her for Eddie, who was then replaced with Rocky. So I guess that means the guy with the devil's eyes was Frank all along, I think. She continues calling him out as an emotional vampire and starts insulting Rocky's intelligence. Frank isn't having that, so Columbia gets Medusa'd too. Then, maybe since Rocky is so hard to control, Frank has him turned to stone as well. Frank tells us,
"It's not easy having a good time. Even smiling makes my face ache."
Amen, brother.
Frank reveals that he took half of Eddie's brain to make Rocky, explaining the gash on Eddie's head, as well as Rocky's half-wit nature. But while Frankenfurter is looking back, lamenting where his plans had gone awry, Magenta and Riff Raff are sick of Earth and just want to go back to their home planet. They bicker, and then Frank instructs them to prepare the floor show. Magenta and Riff Raff do their creepy little gesture again, indicating their nefarious plans. We see Frank preparing the stoned guests with burlesque clothes and makeup. He then de-Medusifies them one at a time, starting with Columbia. As each comes out, they join in the song Rose Tint My World. They each talk about how they seek out and hold on to an escape from their troubles. For Columbia, her problem is Frank's creative obsession with Rocky, but her love for Eddie helped her through it. As Rocky comes out, he says that nothing in this world makes any sense to him other than lust, so he clings to that to stay sane. Brad sings about wanting to follow the image his parents want for him, but being overcome by feeling electrified by the sexiness he's found in the castle and himself. Janet exclaims that the shackles of her past have been broken, that she feels empowered by the unabashed, unrestrained physicality she's enjoyed here. It seems like she's forgiven Frank, because despite his controlling and insults, he's made her feel comfortable in her own body as its sole owner. As Frank joins them, a new song begins. Don't dream it. His outfit is somehow even more glamorous now, with a fur, a new sparkly red bodice, and a single gold armband. Frank begins singing about being inspired by a classic silver screen starlet to dress beautifully. He walks slowly down from a backdrop of a radio broadcast tower into a thick mist. He continues singing, imploring the other characters and the audience to follow his lead and dive headfirst into hedonism. As he jumps into the mist, it spreads slowly outward, revealing a pool. We can see the Sistine Chapel ceiling fresco, the creation of Adam, in the bottom of the pool, and Frank is positioned right where Adam and God touch. Now, I know that Frank isn't exactly known for his propriety, but when he created a man, at least he gave him a gold Speedo. So I guess that means Michelangelo was even hornier than Frankenfurter.
Got a few rounds in ya?
You want to go a few rounds with me?
Time for this turtle to you up.
Also, Frank is waiting in a life buoy of the Titanic, which I think symbolizes both his audacious grandiosity and impending doom. He begins to chant the movie's most powerful phrase.
Don't dream it. Be it.
Such a simple but powerful credo. I'm usually reluctant to give direct advice, but not here. If you have a dream, don't relegate it to fantasy. Make it happen. It's better to fail in pursuit of glory than succeed in pursuit of mediocrity.
The other dancers turn towards him in agreement, joining his chant as they jump in the pool with him. They greet him and start a 5-way makeout session while treading water.
Must be hard work.
As they continue swimming the warm waters of sins of the flesh, Dr. Scott accidentally gets de-medusified himself, and he isn't so keen on joining them. He resists being caught up in the allure to keep his mind and will controlled by a different master. Societal validation. I love how when he imagines what his life would become if he were to engage in their debauchery, that he kicks his leg up, revealing a thigh-high stocking, symbolically tying his physical paralysis to puritanical respectability, since losing the latter would remove the former. Frank bursts out of one song into another, wild and untamed thing. This is a final, energetic portrayal of Frankenfurter's dangerous and exhilarating lifestyle. The song begins with speed and urgency, and the others in the pool start kicking about, creating tumultuous splashes as Rocky raises Frank up out of the pool. His song's language evokes stinging, heart-pounding, and shaking the whole house with his antics. Then everyone else joins in the song, repeating Frank's verse exactly, save for replacing the first person singular with the first person plural. Even Dr. Scott joins in the dancing. I guess his will wasn't too strong. But then Riff Raff and Magenta barge into the room. Riff Raff is pointing a ray gun at Frank, saying that the doctor is now his prisoner. Their mission on Earth is over. They're heading back to their home planet. The betrayal is quite deserved due to Frank's repeated use and abuse of everyone around him, though he's too self-aggrandizing to ask for forgiveness or mercy. The usurped master nevertheless expresses sorrow about leaving this planet behind. In the song, I'm Going Home, the last full song in this version of the movie, he sings about wanting to stay on Earth, of wanting to come back again. Magenta isn't too impressed by his sentimentality. He imagines all his loyal admirers in the empty seats, who will miss him so, but he bids them a tearful goodbye. As his nostalgic fantasy fades, Riff Raff informs Frank that only Magenta and himself are returning. Yeah, he's gonna kill Dr. Frankenfurter with
a laser capable of emitting a beam of pure antimatter.
Brad is shocked, but Dr. Scott reminds him of Eddie's murder and goes back to the credo that
Society must be protected.
And while Riff Raff agrees with Dr. Scott's assessment, I think that he's just using the outrage against Frank as a pretense to gain and maintain power. I don't really see Riff Raff as a paragon of virtue, but he'll gladly be perceived as such if it means he's the one calling the shots. As the tension rises, Columbia screams out, and Riff Raff turns around and blasts her. Frankenfurter tries to climb up the curtain to escape. Weird plan, but Riff Raff takes his shot, and the doctor falls to the ground. Rocky picks up his fallen creator and shrugs off 4 blasts as he does a King Kong impression climbing up the radio tower. The 5th shot does him in, however, and they both fall face down in the pool. Nearly everyone is horrified, even Magenta.
But I thought you liked them. They liked you.
They didn't like me! They never liked me!
Dr. Scott starts sucking up to Riff Raff, cravenly supporting Riff Raff's shooting spree under the guise of moral decency. Riff Raff tells them to fuck off, since they're about to beam the entire castle back to their home planet. After the Earthlings leave, Riff Raff and Magenta rejoice in their imminent return home, where they'll do the time warp again! Mwahahaha! We see Brad, Janet, and Dr. Scott escape the castle just before it blasts off. They crawl around the debris as the criminologist summarizes humanity's struggle for finding their place and meaning in the grand cosmos. As the credits roll, we get a reprise of science fiction double feature and an instrumental version of Time Warp.
Wow. What a ride.
So the deaths at the movie's end have always seemed tragic to me. Now I know that Frank is a monster, but damn if he isn't a fun one. So I have some headcanon for you that can help you rose tint your world as it has mine. I like to think that Magenta knew that Riff Raff was a loose cannon, and so she either tampered with or switched out his antimatter ray gun with a phaser that's set to stun. It could be that the movie lacked the budget to portray it properly, but I think that antimatter would completely destroy whatever it shot, and every character hit with it just seems to slump over unconscious. Though, even with a low budget, they could have just cut to make it look like the character disappeared. It seemed like Magenta and Columbia were pretty close, and that it wasn't the plan to shoot her, but Magenta isn't alarmed by Columbia falling. Now, she does act surprised after Riff Raff stops blasting, but that could be because she wasn't sure he'd actually do it. I also like how this headcanon makes Magenta secretly the most powerful character in the movie.
And it sets the movie up for sequels.
Now, I think that this movie is amazing, if that wasn't already clear, and I never want to replace it. However, I do think a remake, if done with the proper respect it deserves, could be phenomenal. A high-budget recreation would allow some of the less polished aspects to be refined to perfection. In particular, the performance of Rocky is sorely lacking. The actor just seems very awkward in the role, even if he does physically look the part.
But, like, Willem Dafoe was a 19-year-old actor at the time of filming, so there were definitely better choices, even if they would have been hard to find.
Yes.
And there's plenty of cool set design that gets muddled in a clumsy presentation. The choreography is also lackluster, outside of the main cast. And the prop of Eddie's corpse is preposterous. These imperfections can be endearing, but I think that a movie this rough around the edges could turn some people off from its conceptual splendor. And a carte blanche refusal to let future generations reinterpret it would be against the creative spirit the work embodies. But of course the original should continue to get the respect it deserves, with even more relevance due to a well-made revisit. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be talking about how scary this movie is. Well, we have the first murder of innocence since Hocus Pocus, and it's quite a bit more grisly. There's more screams in this movie than in any before on the list. We've got a strange and alien atmosphere. There's some pretty gross, unintentional cannibalism, but the schlockiness takes most of the sting out of the scares. And then there's the rock and roll soundtrack, which puts you in too good of a mood to be scared. But if perversion scares you, then this movie is probably bone-chilling. Overall, I think we're barely scary at this point, and we have a ways to go before you'll feel true fright. But let me know below if you think I've got the order wrong, if you think this wasn't as scary as Elvira Mistress of the Dark was.
Or if you think the distance between 3 and 4 was too nice a jump to rush, and so I skipped one that belongs between them. Let me know about it in the comments.
The other review I'll recommend here is from Daniel Netzel. His channel focuses on retrospectives of film and television, usually focusing in on a particular aspect of the work and how that impacts its reception. For Rocky Horror, he puts it in the context of cult classic films. As he defines it, films that suffer from an initial poor reception, but then transcend that backlash to become beloved by a passionate fan base. As for the show's rocky start, Daniel states,
"The film was pulled from theaters after just one weekend, and the studio canceled its premieres in other cities across America. Sometimes the magic of a stage show is lost in translation when brought to the screen, or maybe the general audiences of 1975 just weren't ready for something as off-kilter and transgressive.
Before it was reconceived as a midnight showing."
The film made its midnight debut at the Waverly Theater in New York City on April 1st, 1976. Shortly after its initial midnight screening, audience members began returning for repeat viewings, often yelling lines at the screen as a way of trying to one-up the other theatergoers, with many of these lines being repeated verbatim to this day.
He goes on to explain how integral the show became to its fans' identities. The video provides a great perspective on the creation and reception of the film. Check it out, the link's in the description. Thank you so much for watching my video all the way to the very end.
After this glorious masterpiece, we're gonna switch gears into an absolute disaster.
But in the next movie's failure, we're gonna find a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. So subscribe and click the bell. Like this video too, because how have you listened to me talk about it for 42 minutes and not liked it? And share this video with anyone you think can handle a movie this wild and untamed.
Until next time, stay sane inside insanity.